Hello and welcome to Chapter Skip. I'm Mark and today I'm reviewing The Babadook. The Babadook is written and directed by Jennifer Kent, and whilst this is the first full-length feature that she has written and directed, she has been in front of the camera a few times as well, in TV shows such as Murder Call and in feature films like Babe, Pig in the City. Still, don't let her minor role in a movie about an anthropomorphic pig colour your opinion of The Babadook, because it features a completely different sort of creature altogether. The film stars Essie Davis as Amelia, a woman who, after the accidental death of her husband, is trying to raise her young son Samuel all on her own. However, Amelia is haunted by nightmares of the accident, whilst her son is convinced there's a monster in the house. This causes Samuel to fashion himself some monster-slaying devices, and it also highlights the fact that Amelia needs to up her parenting game just a little bit, because if my child had fashioned a portable trebuchet that smashed one of my windows, and then they took a homemade crossbow to school with them, well, I might be impressed with their ingenuity and their engineering skills. However, they would still be in line for a serious bollocking. One night, Samuel finds a book entitled Mr. Babadook that he wants his mother to read to him as his bedtime story, only it's not exactly the best choice of story to help a child settle down for the night. Certainly not a child such as Samuel, who already believes there's a monster in the house and that the only way he can defeat it is by smashing its head in. This would have been an entirely different film if she'd have just read him The Gruffalo, or I Want My Hat Back. Love that book. Incidentally, there was a crowdfunding campaign to make a limited run of 6,200 copies of the Babadook pop-up book, which is now unfortunately over. So if you were lucky enough to get a copy, which I believe was also signed by writer-director Jennifer Kent, then well done to you. And yes, I'm just a tiny little bit jealous. Alright, I'm a lot jealous. There's some very nice aesthetic touches to the film, and I especially like the scene set at the children's birthday party, where all the other mums had a near identical look to them, and were dressed as if they were attending a funeral rather than a kid's party, and that for all her problems, Amelia was the person in that scene who seemed the more human. Oh, and just for the record, although pushing little girls out of tree houses is naughty behaviour, and I don't condone it in any way, part of me was glad that it happened, because she was being an obnoxious little shit. Going back to the look of the film, and the camera work is very nicely done, with some really good framing of the images on screen and some subtle movements that add to the atmosphere of creepiness and unease that permeates the movie. There's also been a lot of thought about the colours used in the film too, with Amelia's house looking so drab and grey that it's almost a relief when you see the aforementioned party scene, just to get a splash of bright colour here and there. The acting is also very good, with everyone playing their characters well, and although at first I wasn't entirely sold on Noah Weissman's portrayal of Samuel, any reservations that I had soon disappeared as he did such a good job. Essie Davis also deserves a mention, because not only did she portray a believable and sympathetic character, she also looked so haggard and dishevelled it made a nice change, in an odd sort of way, instead of seeing immaculately pampered and makeup coated characters that are often portrayed as having been through something terrifying and yet still look as fresh as a daisy when the credits roll. It made her character seem that much more real. There was a scene in the film where Amelia first glimpses the Babadook in her neighbour's house that didn't quite work for me, as it just looked a little bit too much like Marilyn Manson was creeping about the place for my liking, and it didn't resemble the figure from the book that she'd read enough for me to not feel disappointed. I think that was more because the pictures in the book made it look like the Babadook's proportions were slightly off kilter, and its head looked oversized and creepy, whereas what you actually see in the film was a little bit, it's a guy with contact lenses and some face paint. The features just looked too human compared to the distorted being that I was expecting. That being said though, the voice of the Babadook was spot on. In fact, the audio throughout the film is very good, with a well executed and haunting soundtrack, even if you do only hear it at the end credits. Not that that was a bad thing though, as the SFX in the film itself are kept fairly subtle. The film is very good, and it does a great job of keeping you wondering if there really is a creature that's terrorising the family, or whether the whole thing is just Amelia's mind unravelling as her mental state of being starts to slip away. I thoroughly enjoyed the movie and thought it had a great creepy atmosphere throughout, which is something that has been lacking from many horror films lately. There are numerous things that aren't fully explained, but rather than being detrimental to the story, I thought they helped it, leaving the viewer to draw their own conclusions. I have my own theory on the nature of the Babadook and on the origin of the pop-up storybook that Samuel found too. Other than my very minor gripe over the face of the Babadook on the few occasions that it was shown, this film was really, really good. And if you want to see a genuinely creepy horror movie that builds tension through the narrative and the atmosphere, then this is a must watch. And I think that it's safe to say that this was one of my top horror movies of 2014. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Only it's not exactly the best choice of story to help a child settle down for the night. Certainly not a child such as Samuel, who will for me, as it just looks a little bit like Marilyn Manson, their fucking flickalablub. I thoroughly enjoyed the movie and thought it had a great